All right, everyone. Venezuela continues to get worse, and if today's tweet by Donald Trump, by the way, is any indicator, it could get more bleak for them. Trump is asking the Saudi Arabians to ramp up oil production perhaps by 2 million barrels. That will collapse the oil price enough to put the screws to Venezuela for at least another year. Based on the very, very sluggish rise of oil prices, it's like, what is it that I don't even remember? And the fact that Venezuela's plan to refine its own gasoline fell through, so it's basically like, what the hell are you thinking? But Mike Pence has gone down there. Trump was busy, I guess, with other things, so he sent he sent Pence down there to Latin America to talk to the other leaders and say, well, you need to lean on Venezuela, which, by the way, is real socialism. You need to shut them out, essentially, because at this point, Maduro's government's not legitimate. It's no longer a sovereign nation insofar as its leadership is actually credible on the world stage. It doesn't make any sense because he's basically not an elected official at this point in a real capacity. Violent, despotic, dictatorial figure who has basically torn up his country's constitution and exercises more or less unlimited power and funds state-run militias to harm his own people. Maduro then came out and did what Maduro would be expected to do, which is call Pence a poisonous viper. So that's rather funny. It's like Mike Pence only very rarely is in the public spotlight. Like, he doesn't actually do much. I don't even know what he does on a day-to-day basis. Like, he must just sort of sit there playing Pokemon or something, or Tetris, because you don't hear much from him. He's like an absentee vice president. We've had several in a row. Like, Dick Cheney didn't like to be in the limelight. Biden occasionally, like, he was sort of the court jester style vice president. Pence is more of the, hey, I'm the rudimentary establishment politician in the room. Trump is the bombastic one, and he sort of gets trotted out only when he's backing Trump and sort of, reassuring the establishment Republicans that the president's not crazy, I suppose, because some of them still think that. But Latin America probably should isolate Venezuela. We can't. The United States doesn't need to get further involved any more than absolutely necessary. I've warned for several years now. No matter how bad it gets in Venezuela, if U.S. troops show up or if the U.S. tries to intervene or blockade their ports or something, it's going to be seen as a foreign hostile invasion by a lot of people in Venezuela. It'll re-solidify Maduro's support, number one, because a lot of people, like 90% of the population, doesn't like him. But you got to realize a lot of them, they don't like him because they think he's inept, but they're still socialists. Even the opposition, they're not like, far right or anything. Maduro will cast them off as that. They're just less socialistic and less inclined to want to see people killed in the streets as they riot over the fact that they have no food. But they're not offering anything that's not just socialism light. There is no libertarian presence in Venezuela. I mean, anyone who is outside of socialism at this point has already fled the country. Several million people are residing abroad. There are refugees from Venezuela and all sorts of Latin American countries, especially Colombia. Now, Colombia, of course, had their own elections and sort of refuted socialism there, probably because of a million Venezuelan refugees telling him how bad it can actually be. So I thought it was good. Several people who I guess are Colombian disagreed, and I'm like, whatever. I looked into it as much as I can without, being the benefit of speaking Spanish, I suppose. But Latin America does need to isolate Maduro, not because of socialism, okay, whatever. That's bad enough. The thing is, though, Maduro has engaged in crimes against his own people on such a degree, such a scale, that it's unconscionable, really, to conduct normalized diplomacy with him. It's like, well, people here. And watch, I'll tell you one thing. I'll make a little prediction as this sort of gets weighed in on by multiple people. People on the left, like the anti-Trumpers, whether it's never Trump Republicans, Democrats, or just people who are socialists themselves, they criticize Trump for attempting to conduct some degree of diplomacy with North Korea. They will also criticize him for overseeing this and suggesting that diplomacy with Venezuela at this point is no longer at this time possible. Then they'll do that mainly because it's a socialistic nation, whereas Kim Jong-un is, I guess, starting to abandon that sort of stuff and adopt maybe a Chinese model. There are tales that within North Korea there's an insular sort of underground capitalistic economy that the government looks the other way on, specifically because it knows that it helps to the economy. It helps people from famine and things like that. A little bit of a black market never hurt nobody, I suppose, is the general tolerant ethos of Kim Jong-un as opposed to his dad and granddad. It's funny because people by the third generation tend to forget things. This has been remarked upon. I think Caracal mentioned that, actually, when I was talking to him. Well, you've got the third generation of North Korean leaders, so maybe that has something to do with the fact that Kim Jong-un occasionally, I don't know, he puts on a tracksuit and smokes Marlboros probably sometimes. As far as Maduro goes, though, you've taken fundamentally a bad economic proposal, which is Chavez economy, centrally planned, oil reliant. It collapses. It was Chavez's fault. Maduro is little more than a pawn. The thing is, Maduro never would have been seen, I think, as a viable potential leader for a significant economic nation, for a nation with a significant presence. At the time, of course, based on oil, Venezuela was quickly becoming the gem of Latin America. The most stable country, the most prosperous, because of capitalistic infrastructure that was being leached off of by socialism that relied upon their monocultural economy continuing to be valuable. Maduro, though, they basically install him. He takes over where Chavez leaves off when he keels over. Chavez was, at the very least, intelligent enough to understand the rudiments of politics, I think, and just thought that oil prices would remain high. He took a gamble that oil prices would continue to go up and up and up because of this peak oil bullshit that some people echo, which we now know is totally false. If there's peak oil at all, it's we're nowhere near on the horizon of it. Oil consumption in some parts of the world has begun to decline already. It's being supplanted by other forms of energy. There's natural gas. Coal has made a resurgence in some parts of the world, like China can't get enough of it. And then you have, of course, alternative energy. You have raised efficiency standards. You have the general slow marching forth of the private economies of the world developing better and better, more efficient technology, therefore making it less and less needful to import enormous amounts of oil. As far as the U.S., we've helped collapse the oil prices accidentally because of fracking and pumping it out of our own grounds where we couldn't get at it before and thought it wasn't there. Now we know that, hey, there's massive bubbles of oil under Texas. We got so much in Alaska, we'll never use it all. It's off the coasts of the Gulf of Mexico. It's all over the Atlantic and Pacific coast. It's basically everywhere. Anywhere we drill, we keep finding it just because we're fracking. As far as Maduro goes, he's just inept. He didn't have any need to switch the economy over. When he took over, oil was still massively pricey, and Venezuela therefore was still riding high. The problem is no attempt was ever made beyond taking that money and borrowing against future oil production to pay off accruing debt and to give people subsidies and also to directly subsidize things, to make state-run stores where you could get, food for pennies, basically. People's wages were up and people enjoyed a decent quality of life there while the oil prices were high. Now the oil prices are a third of what they were at their peak, which means that Venezuela is screwed. And they're not going to get back up there for any time soon. It might be decades before that happens. It might be decades. Look, the parts of the Middle East are beginning to calm down, other than Iran. Syria's starting to calm down. Iraq has gone back to some semblance of normality. ISIS has been basically bombed back to the Stone Age. Libya at some point. Hopefully they'll have less problems there. Egypt shook off the Muslim Brotherhood, the illegitimate government, the theocrats there that Obama tried to install. So things are getting more peaceful. Oil production, therefore, OPEC can manipulate it at a whim, basically. The problem is, if they throttle their production, we'll just pump more because we've got so much oil. Therein lies the problem. There's a reason why King Salman is apparently has signaled to Trump, yeah, I'll raise oil production to lower the price a bit, basically to give people relief. I think especially during summer, important within the United States for the tourist aspect of the economy. That's about all. Peace out.